New York's news and talk station. Download the 77 WABC mobile app now.
WABC New York and 107.1 WLIR Hampton Bays.
It's the 77 WABC News Hour.
Talking the news with Noam Laden.
All the news you need to know with Joe Nolan, traffic, Justin Ellick, sports. And now,
Talking the news with Noam
on 77 WABC.
Good morning. This is James Flippin filling in for Noam Laden on this February 18th, Tuesday. Mostly clear skies this morning around the tri-state. Steady temperature right around 22 degrees with the wind chill more like between 5 and 10. Wind gusts as high as 31 miles per hour. And here's the rest of your 3-day 77 WABC weather forecast to kick things off. Later today, look for mostly sunny skies. A high only near 29 degrees and with the wind chill, much like between 5 and 15. Breezy, gusts again as high as 31 miles per hour. Tomorrow, increasing cloud cover, a high near 31, and the winds will finally, mercifully, calm down some tomorrow. On Thursday, there is a chance for snow, and it'll be mostly cloudy with a high near 30. 21 degrees in Midtown Manhattan, 20 degrees in Verona, New Jersey, and 24 in Valley Stream on Long Island. That's the weather forecast from the 77 WABC Weather Center. Right now, it's 21 degrees and mostly clear from our Midtown studios.
The top 5 at 5.
Almost 20 people injured in a crash, a Toronto plane crash, but amazingly, nothing serious, no casualties. New York Governor Kathy Hochul huddling with elected officials and advisors today in Manhattan. Does Mayor Adams' fate hang in the balance? Some thawing of the ice and potential peace talks with Russia and Ukraine. Local communities continue to deal with catastrophic flooding in Kentucky and parts of the southeastern U.S. And for many others, it's an icy, windy polar vortex that's vexing us here in the dead of winter. But up in the Great White North in Canada, where so much of the talk has surrounded tariffs in recent weeks, it's a plane that crashed and turned over on the tarmac we're talking about today. A really crazy plane crash and what looked like a scene out of Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, Planet Hoth, as the plane turned over completely while attempting to land. Amazingly, no one dead, no major injuries even, and it's being described as more or less a textbook rescue effort there at Toronto's Pearson Airport. This was yesterday afternoon. A Delta flight from Minneapolis crashed. The regional jet operated by Endeavor Air attempting to land at Pearson Airport. In a statement, the airline said the flight was carrying 80 people in total, 76 passengers, 4 crew members. 18 people were taken to area hospitals. Picture, video show the plane upside down in snowy conditions. I said it looked like something out of a snow or ice planet. It would seem weather was definitely a factor there. Deborah Flint is the CEO of the Toronto Pearson Airport.
And foremost, there was no loss of life. And this is in due part to our heroic and trained professionals, our first responders at the airport. So the facts of the matter around this event that happened at approximately 2:30 p.m. is Delta Airlines Flight 4819 from Minneapolis to Toronto, operated by subsidiary Endeavor Air, was involved in a single aircraft accident upon landing at Toronto Pearson. The plane was carrying 4 crew and 76 passengers, among them 22 Canadians. The other passengers were multinational. Airport emergency workers mounted a textbook response, reaching the site within minutes and quickly evacuating the passengers.
Yeah, and there's video on social media that's pretty amazing, watching people kind of get off this plane and, the attempts that they had to make to get out, especially with it being overturned. Pretty intense. Ms. Flint continues here.
17 injured passengers were quickly taken to local area hospitals. At this time, we do not know of any of those passengers having critical injuries. We immediately halted further arrivals and departures on our remaining 3 runways. Those runways were reopened at approximately 5 p.m. The other runways are remaining to serve the investigation, which will be carrying forward for the rest of tonight and into the next several days.
Yeah, so trying to determine the cause of that crash there. But as we did say, it looks like weather may have been a major factor. Back in New York for the first time, Governor Kathy Hochul talking about the possibility of removing New York City Mayor Eric Adams from office. In a statement last night, Hochul says she's asked key leaders to meet with her today for a conversation about the path forward with the goal of ensuring stability for the city of New York. And it seems as though Hochul is kind of feeling the pressure here to potentially kick Adams out. But she does note no governor has ever removed a mayor in New York State history, despite having the power to do so. But Hochul called reports from the past 2 weeks, seemingly referring to the pending dismissal of the Adams federal charges and his change in approach on immigration enforcement, troubling and something that cannot be ignored. And we're going to talk a lot about Adams this morning in terms of his response to this whole situation and what he said at a gathering yesterday that is generating some big-time headlines. The U.S. is holding talks with Russia over potentially ending the war in Ukraine. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, part of the U.S. delegation meeting today in Saudi Arabia. He'll be joined by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. Ukraine not taking part in the talks. President Vladimir Zelensky noting that he wasn't invited. This comes after Secretary Rubio spoke to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov over the weekend, reportedly reaffirming President Trump's commitment to finding an end to the conflict in Ukraine. Severe flooding this weekend being blamed for 2 more deaths across the South. The hardest hit, Kentucky, where Governor Andy Beshear provided an update yesterday and said the death toll had risen to at least a dozen in his state. There was another death reported in Georgia, and 1 person died in West Virginia.
Winter weather alert. 77 WABC.
And obviously, I don't have to tell you if you've spent any time outdoors in recent days. Frigid temperatures making an impact, especially here in the tri-state, but really impacting millions across the country this week. The polar vortex sending temperatures down 30 to 40 degrees lower than normal for what's average this time of year. The north central part of the country getting the worst of it, with wind chills as low as minus 60 degrees in parts of Montana, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. Every time this time of year when I see those temperatures, it's like, really? How do people even deal with that? Extreme cold warnings are in place for over 58 million people from the U.S.-Canada border down to Texas. And those are the top 5 headlines at 5, and I'm James Flippin in for Noam Laden. WABC News Time, 5:09. This is James Flippin in for Noam Laden. And so let's sink our teeth into the 2, I would say, definitely top stories right now. What's going on with Mayor Eric Adams here in New York City, and then up in Toronto, that crazy plane crash. Everybody probably a little more sensitive to the issue of potential plane crashes after what happened in Washington, D.C. in recent weeks. But in this case, no fatalities, 18 injuries. And let's go back to CEO Deborah Flint of Pearson Airport. She continued to praise the response of those involved in the rescue efforts yesterday.
We are very grateful that there was no loss of life and relatively minor injuries. We are very focused on the care and the concern and the passengers and the crew, some of whom have already been reunified with their friends and their families. Others we have in a comfortable place right here at the airport in an environment where they're getting a lot of care and support from my staff. Delta Airlines is also continuing to provide customer care and information for passengers. In closing, no airport CEO wants to have these type of press conferences, but this is exactly what our emergency, our operations, and our federal, our first responder partners are all practiced and trained for.
And local paramedic supervisor Lawrence Sandin discussed the injuries during the early part of the investigation.
We've had one child that was taken by land ambulance to one of our sick kids hospitals in downtown Toronto. We've had another patient airlifted to a trauma center we have in Toronto. And the rest of our injuries are mild to moderate, with most of them being able to walk on their own.
Yeah, it's just really amazing when you see the pictures of the plane, the fact that it turned over completely. That nothing major happened from an injury perspective is just kind of stunning. But Sandin, the paramedic supervisor, does note just how snowy it's been there in Toronto.
We've had some very severe weather here over the last 5 days. I believe we've gotten probably 2 to 3 feet of snow.
And the investigation into the reason for the crash ongoing. At a gathering here in New York City with some of his supporters at Brooklyn's Rehoboth Cathedral yesterday, Mayor Adams heard cheers of 4 more years.
Let's go back. When I was indicted, y'all remember what happened? People departed. When I was indicted, people said that's the end of the administration.
But 4 deputy mayors in Mayor Adams' administration have resigned over his Trump ties and the reprieve from federal corruption charges that came recently. Those 4 senior aides are Maria Torres Springer, Deputy Mayor for Operations Mira Joshi, Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services Ann Williams-Isom, and Deputy Mayor for Public Safety Chauncey Parker. All those individuals have submitted resignation letters over concerns that Mayor Adams, may have got the charges dropped that he faced concerning alleged bribery and corruption in exchange for helping President Trump's immigration crackdown and migrant deportations. As to that allegation of what many in the news are calling a quid pro quo, Adams denies it. There are even growing calls for the mayor to exit, saying he really needs to resign, but he insists he's stepping up, not stepping down, something he's said before, a line he's used before. New York City Council Speaker Adrian Adams, no relation, among the latest to call for Adams to step down. And that following, as we said, the resignation of the 4 deputy mayors, the speaker says it's become quite clear that the mayor has now lost the confidence and trust of even his own staff. In terms of how his colleagues and most New Yorkers feel about it, she says he must prioritize New York City by resigning, adding the city no longer has the ability to effectively govern. Adrian Adams, the speaker, saying the mayor's actions and decisions that have led to months of instability now compromise the city's sovereignty, threaten chaos, and risk harm to families. So in addition to all of this, and this does go back to that event at the church yesterday, Mayor Adams somehow generating even more controversy yesterday because he invoked Adolf Hitler's book while defending himself from calls to resign, talking about Mein Kampf at a gathering at that Brooklyn Rehoboth Cathedral yesterday. Adams described calls for his resignation as a modern-day Mein Kampf. And that is the book that Adolf Hitler wrote amid his rise to power.
You know, I remember listening to some of Dr. King's teaching, and he talked about the book Mein Kampf. And he indicated if you tell a lie long enough, loud enough, people would tend to believe it's true.
City Comptroller Brad Lander, who is running in the June primary against Adams to become mayor, also the city's highest elected Jewish official, condemned that reference. Other candidates did the same. But Adams, in a statement, notes that he was referencing a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Even while Adams continues to face backlash, some sticking by his side.
Speaking to clergy of various faiths at Rehoboth Cathedral in Brooklyn on Sunday, Adams again touted his record.
I ignore the noise. I know what we have accomplished. That is why I move through these streets at the level of comfort that I have.
The mayor denies any quid pro quo with the Trump administration, insisting he's not going anywhere. 4 of his deputy mayors resigned Monday. Adams says he's disappointed, but wishes them nothing but success. I'm Lisa Ritchie for 77 WABC News.
And James Flippin here for Noam Laden on this 5 a.m. news hour. Switching up and going for some national news, the top official at the Social Security Administration stepping down after an apparent disagreement with the Department of Government Efficiency. That's, of course, Elon Musk's effort aimed at reducing fraud and waste and increasing efficiency within government operations. Michelle King resigned after refusing a request from DOJ to access sensitive government records at the agency. The information reportedly dealt with Americans' bank info, Social Security numbers, marital status, and date of birth. Also, nearly 300 Federal Aviation Administration employees have been fired by the Trump administration. The employees got their notices this past weekend in a move the union that represents them calls a hastily made decision in an agency already challenged by understaffing. The workers affected include mechanics, aviation safety assistants, and others. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy of the Trump cabinet posted last night on X that less than 400 of the agency's 45,000 employees were let go, and they were all probationary workers. WABC News Time, 5:15. Going to turn now to the sports desk and get the latest from Justin Ellick.
Well, thank you, James Flippin. Not much in that latest category there to get to. You really only had some Four Nations action in the NHL. Of course, that tournament that's in place of this year's All-Star festivities. Early in the afternoon, Team Canada defeated Team Finland 5-3 with a pair of goals from McKinnon, along with tallies from Point, McDavid, and Crosby. And in the nightcap, Team USA dropped their first contest of the round robin, losing 2-1 at the hands of Team Sweden. Jesper Fast and Gustav Nyquist contributed to the winning effort with goals for Sweden, while New York's own Chris Kreider netted his first goal of the tournament for the Americans. Loss wouldn't matter, though, with their ticket, the Americans that is, to the championship game punched prior. They'll be joined in the title game by Canada following their win over Finland, with action set for Thursday night from Boston's TD Garden. Looking forward to that one. To the NBA, where after another underwhelming weekend filled with all-star festivities in their league, the search for the right NBA all-star format is still ongoing. There was plenty of talk this weekend in San Francisco about an idea that has picked up some momentum in recent years. The U.S. on one side, the world on the other side. There is some evidence that a midseason matchup between the best American players and the best international players might work, and it is happening right now in the NHL. The aforementioned Four Nations Face-Off hockey tournament, which did open last week in Montreal, concludes obviously this Thursday, aforementioned in Boston. It's obviously not meaningless to the players involved. They clearly care a lot about it. There's been fighting, 3 brawls in the first 9 seconds of the USA versus Canada game in Montreal on Saturday alone, and a ton of physicality, along with just in general, just exciting hockey. These guys get it up when it comes to playing for a country. So it's been much to the delight of fans, and if I'm the NBA, I'm considering that as a possibility moving forward. That's Sports James. I'm Justin Ellick on 77 WABC.
Thank you, Justin. WABC News Time 5:19. James Flippin filling in for Noam Layden. So you heard Justin talking sports. Well, the NFL offseason is officially here. And teams around the league can now begin franchise tagging players. All eyes on Cincinnati, as the Bengals are expected to place that franchise tag on standout wide receiver T. Higgins for a second straight season. Organizations can use this method to work out a long-term deal with players, and that's what Cincinnati's hoping to do with Higgins. If an impending free agent decides to play on the franchise tag, then basically it's a one-year deal worth an average of the top 5 paid players in the position over the past 5 seasons. Who else could get that franchise tag? Well, maybe Vikings quarterback Sam Darnold, former Jets quarterback, and also Jets cornerback DJ Reed, a candidate for the franchise tag. Teams have to decide on that over the next 2 weeks. Over 150 people took part in the 50501 protest in downtown Grand Rapids on President's Day to express their anger at actions taken by President Donald Trump. They held up signs like, "If you're not scared, you're not paying attention," and "Elon stole my Social Security number." The grassroots protest grew from the first that was held back on February 5th.
Elon Musk has got to go!
They love that so-and-so has got to go one. Helen Kennedy of Greenville says she was there to object to Elon Musk's, quote, infiltration of our agencies and overtaking of our government. Carl Kelly of Grand Rapids says he was there to resist the takeover of our government from the oligarchs.
I'm here to resist this takeover of our government from oligarchs and wealthy billionaires.
Yeah, they're saying that Musk wasn't elected, Trump double-crossed us.
And it's ridiculous to give up so much information to people that we don't know anything about. We didn't elect them. We didn't elect Elon Musk. We elected Trump, and he double-crossed us.
Also talking a lot about the protests this morning there with what's going on in downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan, but also here in the city. There's going to be some Mayor Adams protests unfolding throughout the week. There was one that went up at City Hall yesterday. And then here in the city, 4 people were hurt in an overnight fire at an apartment building. That's in Washington Heights. One of the victims, according to the FDNY, critically injured. Flames broke out on the 3rd floor of an apartment building on Wadsworth Avenue around 12:40 a.m., and it did take the fire department about an hour to get the flames under control. Swinging over to New Jersey, the water is salty in Rahway. Apparently, you can taste it. Residents in Rahway, New Jersey, say their water tastes salty. Veolia Water Rahway blames routine winter snow removal measures, in which, of course, they use that rock salt to melt down the ice. Specifically, there's elevated chloride levels from road salt runoff. The company says snow and ice control treatments along roadways, of course, impact the city of Rahway's water supply, the Rahway River. And this year, weather has produced chloride levels not previously seen. Salt in the water not harmful to most in terms of this level, but it is potentially a concern if you have a low sodium diet. Treatment of the water continues, but the chloride basically has to work itself through. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer plans to visit Washington, D.C. next week. This trip will include his first ever in-person meeting with President Trump. It comes as the U.S. has called on European nations to increase their defense spending. A spokesperson for Starmer says the Prime Minister looks forward to meeting with President Trump shortly to discuss how we can deepen the special relationship across trade, investment, and security. Internet searches for gambling addiction are up. Experts say sports betting is to blame. The Journal of the American Medical Association said in a recent report that if gambling addiction gets out of control, it could develop into a serious mental health disorder and cause other problems. Searches for gambling addiction in 2022 increased 22% in terms of people looking for help with gambling addiction, and then that category jumped to 25% in 2023. In the first half of 2024, it ticked up 31%. So this is definitely on the rise. States showing the highest amount of searches include Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. A Supreme Court ruling back in 2018 legalized state-sponsored sports gambling throughout most of the U.S., and we do have it in New York and New Jersey for sure. Los Angeles United School District. Those students have a new rule. They got to start getting used to it starting today.
Cell phones are now banned. The district's board passed that ban back in June, and it officially goes into effect today. Schools can either instruct students to keep their phones in their backpacks during the entire school day, or the phones can be locked up in special containers the district has purchased. There are some exceptions, including for students who need their phones for translation purposes or to help with learning disabilities. The LAUSD says the phone ban will encourage more in-person interaction among the students and better focus in class. Some parents, though, have expressed concern about their children not having access to their phones in case of an emergency. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
And Governor Kathy Hochul, who we told you is having a meeting today in Manhattan to discuss the possibility of removing Mayor Adams from office. She has talked about wanting to ban cell phones in New York schools. But out in Los Angeles, jurors will begin deliberations today in the trial of rapper A$AP Rocky. He's facing 2 felony charges of assault with a semi-automatic firearm, and that's stemming from a 2021 altercation. The 36-year-old could get up to 24 years in prison if convicted. Israel is set to receive more hostages held by Hamas this coming Saturday. And that's what sources tell NBC News, and also that in addition to these hostages, Hamas is expected to turn over the bodies of dead hostages come Thursday. Every previous release of Israeli hostages has been accompanied by the release of several Palestinians detained in Israeli prisons, coming as Israel's security cabinet met today to discuss the second phase of this ongoing ceasefire deal with Hamas. Mexico's president says the Gulf of America name change made in Google Maps is an inaccurate designation, and there's been a threat to sue Google as a result of this. President Trump signed an executive order changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, but Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says what Google is doing here is changing the name of the continental shelf of Mexico and Cuba, which has nothing to do with Trump's decree, she says. And apparently, she says it should only apply to the U.S. Police in Island Heights, back here in the tri-state, this in New Jersey, are investigating an accident in which a motorist drove up onto the boardwalk, damaging the boardwalk, knocking down power lines. The accident happened early Sunday morning, right after midnight, when the driver apparently lost control of the car. Power lines, a street line fell. Crews were able to repair most of that by later that morning. No word on any injuries to the motorist. Around 150 homes in southwest Detroit were flooded by a 54-inch water main break. That was early yesterday morning. City officials say it's the worst water main break ever in the city of Detroit. It flooded homes from Lafayette to Waterman. Rescue teams rescued families and their pets using boats and front-end loaders. Detroit Police Harbor Master Dean Rademacher saying this was really unreal.
We're usually in bodies of water. We didn't expect to be in a neighborhood doing rescues in a neighborhood.
Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan says they're trying to make sure everybody has a safe place to stay now. City works focusing on the water main repairs.
We are now moving into mode of making sure every single family in every one of those homes is safe.
Todd Bettison is Detroit's interim police chief, says this water main break flood was just nothing short of huge.
We got Lenawee County. We have folks we've had response and dive teams that have come as far away as an hour away.
The mayor's office says the city will provide the displaced families with hotel rooms at no cost as well as food. The Great Lakes Water Authority and Detroit Water and Sewage Department covering half of the repair costs for uninsured residents. Coming up on 5:30 here Tuesday, February 18th, James flipping in for Noam Layden. On the 5 a.m. news hour, a measles outbreak in West Texas has infected about 4 dozen people. Health officials fear the number may be as high as 200 to 300. And then also in Texas, Austin, apparently the best U.S. state capital to live in. That's according to a new Wallet Hub study. Madison, Raleigh, Boise, and Atlanta rounding out the top 5. Well, we've got some questions here as to who steals a Lego. No, seriously, cops in Washington State want to know who stole all these Legos. Also, will an asteroid hit Earth in 2032? We're tracking the odds, and we'll get a look at Wall Street and economic data after this. It's James flipping in for Noam Layden on the 77 WABC 5 a.m. News Hour.
The 77 WABC News Hour.
Talking the news with Noam Layden
On 77 WABC. It's the 77 WABC News Hour.
Talking the news with Noam Layden.
All the news you need to know with Joe Nolan, traffic, Justin Ellick, sports. And now,
Talking the news with Noam
on 77 WABC.
Good morning. James Flippin filling in here for Noam on February 18th. A Tuesday, and around the tri-state this morning, mostly clear. Steady temperatures right around 22 degrees, but with the wind chill, more like in the single digits. And wind gusts will remain as high as 31 miles per hour. Here is the 30-day 77 WABC weather forecast later today. Sunny, a high near 29. Wind chill more like between 5 and 15. Those gusts going to remain as high as 31. Tomorrow, increasing cloud cover, a high near 31. The wind's going to mercifully calm down some, and then there is some snow in the forecast for Thursday. Mostly cloudy, a high near 30. Right now, 20 degrees under mostly clear skies outside of our Midtown studios. That's the latest from the 77 WABC Weather Center. And just buzzing through some of the big stuff we're talking about this morning. Peace talks move forward between Russia and U.S. officials. Hopefully, 18 hurt in a Toronto plane crash. The plane totally flipped over on the runway. And New York Governor Kathy Hochul going to have a meeting today with top officials in New York concerning the future of Mayor Eric Adams. Could she decide to remove him as mayor? She's noted that that's never happened before, but 4 deputy mayors have stepped down after charges were dropped against Adams concerning alleged bribery and corruption. Of course, he's also cozied up to President Trump recently, and top Democrats don't like that here in New York. City Council Speaker Adrian Adams among the latest to call for Mayor Adams, no relation, to resign. And now to the Pacific Northwest we go. A store that sells Legos in University Place, Washington, was hit by burglars who stole thousands of dollars worth of collector sets. The suspects backed a U-Haul truck up to the front door of Sasquatch Bricks and in about 5 minutes loaded these highly valued collectibles into the truck. Lego have been the target of thieves across the country because retired sets are expensive. And there I actually corrected myself because you're not supposed to say Legos. That's one of those misnomers. I guess the plural is just Lego without an S. But thieves target these sets because they're so expensive, the retired ones that are taken out of circulation. The Pierce County Sheriff's Office reviewing video from a nearby building and the owners asking for Lego collectors to watch online and see if these sets hit the market. The chances of an asteroid hitting Earth in 2032 are rising.
A new estimate from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory says the asteroid, called 2024 YR4, has a 2.6% chance of Earth impact. That's up from a 2.3% chance announced last week. NASA says the near-Earth asteroid measures up to 300 feet across and has a very small chance of hitting Earth on December the 22nd, 2032. That said, the probability has been increasing since the asteroid was discovered weeks ago. In late January, the chance of it hitting Earth was 1.2%. I'm Mark Mayfield.
So the stock market was closed yesterday in observance of President's Day. Trading will resume later this morning. As this is an abbreviated trading week, markets hovered around their flat line for much of Friday's session before closing mixed Investors weighing the latest concerning tariffs and inflation. Last week saw new numbers on both wholesale and consumer price inflation. New government data showed a nearly 1% drop in retail sales for January. Consumers were dialing back on their post-holiday spending. And looking ahead this week in terms of economic data, today we get this month's Empire State Manufacturing Survey. That's looking at New York's economic output. And there's also this month's Home Builder Confidence Index set to be published. Sticking with the housing market, January's housing starts and requested building permits, those kind of forward indicators for home construction. That's due Wednesday, tomorrow. Also, we'll be looking at some new data from the Fed's meeting, the January meeting. The minutes are due out tomorrow. Jobless claims come Thursday, as do January's leading economic indicators. And then Friday, we'll get the S&P Services and Manufacturing PMI, as well as this month's consumer sentiment and last month's existing home sales. As we think about snow and ice and the wintry mix that we've been dealing with here in the polar vortex, the Minnesota Department of Transportation has announced the winners in this year's Name a Snowplow contest. This is always a fun one they do online. Among the winners, Plowabunga, Anthony Sledwards, and we're off to see the blizzard. Each Minnesota Department of Transportation district gets its own snowplow using one of those winning names. Guns N' Roses, Tool, and more will join Black Sabbath's final concert.
Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches.
And Jason Momoa also going to be added to the lineup for Black Sabbath's final show. It was on Monday when Ozzy Osbourne took to Instagram to share the new additions to the Back to the Beginning show. Momoa will host the event, while Rage Against the Machine's Tom Morello will be the musical director. The show will feature the classic lineup of Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. Back to the Beginning will be their first performance together in 2 decades, taking place in Birmingham, England on July 5th. WABC News Time coming up on 5:40. James Flippin filling in for Noam Laden. Out on the West Coast, a new California bill aims to keep firefighters employed year-round to address staffing shortages and improve emergency response. Of course, that's such a concern right now following those devastating wildfires in the L.A. and San Diego areas. The Fight for Firefighters Act proposes moving about 3,000 seasonal firefighters into full-time positions, ensuring more firefighters will be available when needed. And Cal Fire says California's fire season no longer threatens the state for just 3 to 4 months. California-based Apple set to launch a new product tomorrow. Apple CEO Tim Cook announced the launch date last week, but didn't say exactly what the product would be. He posted on social media it would be the newest member of the family. Speculation is Apple could be taking the wraps off a new iPhone SE4. The revamped SE is expected to feature a larger screen, Face ID, and Apple Intelligence, expected to sell for around $500. New York City Mayor Eric Adams certainly stirred up some additional controversy yesterday.
It happened when he invoked Adolf Hitler's book while defending himself against calls to resign.
You know, I remember listening to some of Dr. King's teaching, and he talked about the book Mein Kampf. And he indicated if you tell a lie long enough, loud enough, people would tend to believe it's true.
Mayor Adams spoke at an event in Brooklyn as 4 deputy NYC mayors announced their resignations over the Justice Department's controversial decision to dismiss federal corruption charges against him. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
And today, Governor Hochul will be holding a meeting in Manhattan to discuss the future of Adams. She does have the ability as governor to potentially remove him from office, and it sounds like she's at least considering that at this point. Up in Toronto, the Transportation Safety Board of Canada leading the investigation into the plane crash at Pearson Airport yesterday. It left 18 people hurt. The National Transportation Safety Board here in the U.S. also sending a team of U.S. investigators to help out. The regional Delta Airlines flight arriving from Minneapolis when it flipped over and caught fire while landing. The plane had 80 people on board. 18 were taken to hospitals, various injuries ranging from traumatic to minor, but mostly they're saying really nothing too severe here. The crash happened during blowing snow and winds of up to 40 miles per hour. Coming off what was certainly a windy President's Day here in the tri-state, a rare letter valued at $150,000, written by George Washington. That letter's up for sale.
A Rab Collection spokesperson said it was written during the Revolutionary War, at a time when the general had been fighting for independence from Britain for 2 years. In the letter, Washington praised colonists at the heart of the American Revolution and the spirit of the colonists to take up their own arms to fight off the British oppressors. The letter is 8 by 12 inches, handwritten on both sides of one sheet, and has a smudged fingerprint near Washington's signature. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
A bird flu vaccine for chickens now has the green light. The Department of Agriculture gave conditional approval on Friday to Zoetis, a company which started updating its vaccine back in 2022. Millions of chickens have been killed to stop the spread of bird flu, causing a massive spike in egg prices. Nearly 300 Federal Aviation Administration employees have been fired by the Trump administration. We also heard this week about cutbacks within the IRS, all part of the Trump White House's push to increase government efficiency, part of that DOGE push as well. We found out that a top official at the Social Security Administration is stepping down after a disagreement with the Department of Government Efficiency.
Michelle King resigned after refusing a request from DOGE to access sensitive government records at the agency. The information reportedly dealt with Americans' bank info, Social Security numbers, marital status, and date of birth. President Trump has appointed Leland Dudek, a manager in charge of Social Security's anti-fraud office, as acting commissioner. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Help if I turn my mic on. Thank you, Lo. Actress Julianne Moore says her children's book Freckle Face Strawberry is banned in schools run by the Department of Defense. Moore says that she attended a Department of Defense Frankfurt American High School in Germany, and a DoD education activity official said books have been removed on a temporary basis, but none have been banned thus far due to 2 executive orders signed by President Trump. The book is about a red-haired, freckled 7-year-old girl who apparently felt like an outcast, but eventually realizes we all tend to feel that way sometimes. Cleanup efforts continue throughout the 5 boroughs following the latest winter storm, and strong winds, damaging winds, tore through New York City and the region as a whole Sunday as well as yesterday, knocking down trees, power lines, signs. That's at a variety of locations. Large trees felled in the Riverdale section of the Bronx. Some vehicles took the brunt of that damage. Residents in Elmhurst, Queens, also reporting a similar issue. And then Brooklyn, a major cleanup following the heavy winds. The next winter storm could roll in as soon as tomorrow, maybe going into Thursday as well, and bring some snow. WABC News Time, 5:45. Justin Ellick now with the latest in sports. Justin.
Well, thank you, James Flippin. We'll check in here on ice hockey and the NHL, where the league's 4 nations face-off tournament continued yesterday in place of this year's All-Star festivities. Early in the afternoon, Team Canada defeated Team Finland 5-3 with a pair of goals from McKinnon, along with tallies from Point, McDavid, and Crosby. In the nightcap, Team USA dropped their first contest of the round robin, losing 2-1 at the hands of Team Sweden. Jesper Fast and Gustav Nyquist contributed to the winning effort with goals for Sweden, while New York's own Chris Kreider netted his first goal of the tournament for the Americans. The loss wouldn't matter, though, with the American ticket to the championship game already punched. They'll be joined in the title game by Canada following their win over Finland, with action set for Thursday night from Boston's TD Garden. To the NBA, where after another underwhelming weekend filled with all-star festivities, the search for the right NBA all-star format is still ongoing. There was plenty of talk this weekend in San Francisco about an idea that has picked up some momentum in recent years, the U.S. on one side and the world on the other side. There is some evidence that a mid-season matchup between the best American players and the best international players might work, and it's happening right now in another sport with the aforementioned 4 nations face-off hockey tournament, which did open last week in Montreal, and of course, as I did say, concludes this Thursday in Boston. It's obviously not meaningless to the players involved. They're playing hard, and there's been a lot of physicality and fighting, if that. 3 brawls in the first 9 seconds of the USA versus Canada game in Montreal on Saturday alone, much to the delight of hockey fans. So if you're the NBA, you got to take a good, long, hard look at that. That's your sports, James. I'm Justin Ellick on 77 WABC.
All right, thank you, Justin. And in the Bronx, cops are investigating. A man was shot and killed outside a deli. Officers called to the Belmont section last night. They found a 56-year-old man with a gunshot wound to the chest. The victim taken to a hospital. That's where he was pronounced dead. No arrests made as of this morning. Authorities say the victim and the shooter were in some sort of an argument, and that's when the gunfire erupted. A teenage boy now faces charges in the alleged accidental shooting death of a 17-year-old girl in Queens. This happened over the weekend. The 16-year-old boy apparently playing around with a gun, and that's when it went off. Deaza Barkley, hit by the gunfire, rushed to a hospital. That's where she died. The 16-year-old, the boy, now facing charges, including manslaughter. Cops are trying to figure out exactly who owns the gun and who fired it as well. Jimmy Page sharing his response to fans' reactions on the Becoming Led Zeppelin movie.
Way, way down inside, honey, you need I'm gonna give you my love. I'm gonna give you my love. Oh, a lot of love.
The guitarist and film's producer thanked fans for their incredible responses, and the feedback is just humbling and inspiring. He also thanked fans for their enthusiasm and shared the movie's trailer on Instagram for those who haven't seen it yet. Becoming Led Zeppelin premiered earlier this month and has earned over $6 million at the box office worldwide. Page is the only Led Zeppelin member who has publicly commented on the film since its release. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Southwest Airlines cutting 15% of its corporate workforce. This is the airline's first mass layoff in its history, affecting around 1,750 workers in leadership roles, some of them in senior positions. The airline calls it part of an effort to cut costs. President Trump is nominating a so-called Stop the Steal organizer to be the District of Columbia's top prosecutor. Ed Martin advocated for January 6th defendants, and he's currently serving as the district's interim U.S. attorney. President Trump made the announcement less than 3 days after Martin posted on social media he would be investigating former special counsel Jack Smith. And on the eve of the events of January 6th, 2021 at the Capitol, Martin was among those who called on diehard true Americans to work until their last breath to stop the steal amid allegations of potential voter fraud and other improprieties during the 2020 presidential election. President Trump took to social media to say that Martin's been doing a great job in his current interim role, fighting tirelessly to restore law and order and make our nation's capital safe and beautiful again. Israel set to receive 6 more hostages held by Hamas Saturday.
Sources told NBC News that in addition to these 6 hostages, Hamas is expected to turn over the bodies of multiple hostages on Thursday. Of the 33 people set to be released in the first phase of the ceasefire deal, 6 living hostages and 8 dead ones remain in the hands of Hamas. Every previous release of Israeli hostages has been accompanied by the release of dozens of Palestinians detained in Israeli prisons. I'm Brian Shook.
Former candidate for president and tech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, at one time was going to head up Doge alongside Elon Musk. Now it's Musk's gig alone. Ramaswamy is expected to launch his run for Ohio governor next week. The former Republican presidential candidate has filed the campaign paperwork as of this past weekend, and he would run against Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost in the GOP primary race to replace current Republican Governor Mike DeWine. Ramaswamy appears to be the front-runner for the seat, given his wide recognition after that presidential run and having brought on some of Vice President Vance's top advisors. 2 patients seeking treatment at an East Harlem urgent care triggered a health scare over the weekend. This incident happened Sunday at a City MD center. Reports from the center initially were that 2 people seeking treatment were exposed to the Ebola virus through somebody from Uganda who was sick. Those 2 rushed to the hospital by EMS workers who were wearing hazmat suits, but it was later determined that neither patient had actually been exposed to Ebola. Chances are they were actually suffering from norovirus or stomach flu. The chances of an asteroid hitting Earth in 2032 are going up. A new estimate from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory says the asteroid, called 2024 YR4, has a 2.6% chance of Earth impact. And that's up from 2.3% announced last week. NASA says the near-Earth asteroid measures up to 300 feet across. I've heard reports describing it as like the size of a small office building. It has a chance of hitting Earth on December 22nd, 2032. And basically, if it hit a city, that would be a big, big problem. That said, the probability has been increasing since the asteroid was discovered weeks ago that it could hit. In late January, the chance of it hitting Earth was 1.2%. And NASA also says it could hit the moon and be a crazy sight, as that would be visible from Earth. It is spring training. Pitchers and catchers underway down in Florida and in Arizona. Red Sox third baseman Rafael Devers claiming his territory when asked if he'd be willing to change positions now that the Sox have signed third baseman Alex Bregman away from the Astros. Devers simply said, no, third base is my position. And that was the response through a translator. Asked if he'd become a designated hitter, he said no. And then Mike Trout, the Angels legend and star outfielder, he's going to be making a position switch. He is entering his 15th big league season, and he's going to move to right fielder, as the 33-year-old says he knew this was coming prior to the team's first squad workout Monday. This is in an effort to preserve his body and keep him healthy. Back here in New York, a Long Island family is suing the wife and daughter of notorious mobster John Gotti Jr.
It's tied to a brawl at a basketball game at Locust Valley High School. Last year, the mother and daughter, Kimberly and Gianna, allegedly began throwing racial and homophobic slurs towards one of the players, causing the family of that player to get upset. When the family confronted the Gottis, the fight became physical and spilled onto the court. Assault charges were handed to the Gottis, but in October, the case was tossed on a technicality. Now the family is suing the Gottis for $50 million. I'm Liz Radabali for 77 WABC News.
Golden State Warriors superstar Steph Curry is now the world's second highest paid athlete. The new ranking from Sportico found that the 36-year-old Curry earned nearly $154 million in 2024. $100 million of those dollars came from endorsements. And only soccer superstar Cristiano Ronaldo earned more than Curry last year, as that soccer star brought home a whopping $215 million. Well, experts say that sports betting is to blame for this one. Internet searches for gambling addiction are up.
The Journal of the American Medical Association said in a recent report that if gambling addiction gets out of control, it could develop into serious mental health disorders and other problems. Searches for gambling addiction help in 2022 increased 22%, then jumped 25% in 2023, and the first half of 2024 ticked up to 31%. States showing the highest number of searches are Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. A Supreme Court ruling in 2018 legalized state-sponsored sports gambling throughout most of the U.S. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Well, let's see. It's not even 6 a.m. yet, so I probably shouldn't really be thinking about this, but I just don't need any excuse. Today is National Drink Wine Day, and we've got some details on a celebration that's more than just popping the cork.
This is the day to grab a bottle of wine, a good bottle, any color, any variety. It's a day set out for the appreciation of wine and its health properties, as it's National Drink Wine Day. According to Harvard Health,
Supposed to do that one, was I?
According to Harvard Health, wine is known to reduce the risk of heart disease, liver disease, type 2 diabetes, and even some cancers. Today, we celebrate the 800 grapes that gave their lives for the bottle. That deserves a little respect. And a designated driver. I'm Bree Tennis.
I promise you I did not yet pop that cork. That was simply a technical malfunction. But coming up on 5:59, James Flippin filling in for Noam Layton. And now, officially in his role as the executive producer of Sid and Friends on the Morning, Justin Ellick's going to tell us what to expect on the program.
Well, thank you for highlighting that transition there, James Flippin. It's very important.
I saw you putting on the jacket that indicates you're now changed from sports guy to producer.
Indeed.
So I say, okay, let's make note of that.
It looks a lot like the Guardian Angels, the old Curtis Sliwa jacket that he used to run around this place in, except on the back it doesn't say Guardian Angels. It just says Executive Producer Extraordinaire.
Yeah, and it's much fresher too. It's got like a nice freshly laundered scent.
Right, I do wash it. Coming up on Tuesday morning, Sid and Friends in the Morning. Kicking us off in the way of guests here, James. At 6:45, it's going to be Norman Seabrook right before Sal Greco slides into that former Curtis Sliwa slot there at 7:15. At 7:15, it'll be Sal Greco right before Carol Markowitz, our good friend from the New York Post. She'll join at 7:45 right before another New York Post columnist, and Miranda Devine hops on at 8:30. We'll have Victoria Coates experts on the program. The former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump and now the VP of the Heritage Foundation. I believe she's making her debut on the program. That'll be around 8:45. Looking forward to that. Right before we talk some hockey with the great Ron Duguay in the 9 a.m. hour. It's all coming up. Sid and Friends in the morning on a Tuesday morning. James Flippin coming at you in just a few short moments.
All right, and that is the 5 a.m. news hour. James Flippin in for Noam Layden. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada leading the investigation into that plane crash in Toronto. The U.S. holding talks with Russia over possibly ending the war in Ukraine. And Governor Kathy Hochul huddling with leaders today in Manhattan discuss about possibly kicking out Mayor Adams from office, something no New York governor has ever done before. James Flippin here on the 77 WABC 5 a.m. news hour.
Download the 77 WABC mobile app now. Get the latest news and information. Listen to your favorite shows and podcasts anywhere you go. Available now on Google Play and in the App Store. Talk Radio 77 WABC.